But what might be even crazier is their army composition. A good army needs to be able to counter an enemy, which as often as not means balance. A good army will ideally have armoured infantry to deal with opposing infantry, spearmen to deal with cavalry, cavalry to deal with basically everything, and probably some archers or artillery for good measure. But the AI, no matter the difficulty you play at, will build some absurd armies. For the most part, they have a dire lack of cavalry, and whoever has the most horse usually wins. But they also often build armies with things like crossbowmen or gunmen making up the bulk of their forces, and your cavalry can easily run these troops down. That's not to say they won't sometimes hit you with some really balanced armies now and then, and sheer attrition alone will have your back against the wall, so don't get me wrong, this game can be challenging. But if you're a strategy veteran, it's simply a matter of when you win, not if, no matter the difficulty, thanks to some very silly turn-based AI. Another issue is that the AI is completely incapable of sending out armies via ships. At least I've never seen it happen. This means if you play as a British faction, your island fortress will be completely safe at all times once you've unified the island, and your only competition in the new world will be the natives. All of these problems do sour the experience, but not enough to ruin it. At the head of every army is hopefully a general. If you don't have a general handy, one of your other units can fill in as a captain, but he'll have no statistics, and your men will be far more prone to rebellion, meaning you can lose the entire force outright, and the rebels will take control of it. So it really goes without saying that your general is by far your single most important unit, if only for that fact alone. But he does even more. You shouldn't think of him as a Warcraft 3 style hero, but he plays a vital role in the battle. His mere presence on the battlefield is usually more significant than his actions, as it's his statistics that determine how his men act and how the enemy acts. And each general also has a retinue and additional traits that may affect his statistics or his men's. Having a bard in the retinue, for example, will increase his men's morale, but having a mistress will decrease his men's morale and reduce the chances that that general will have children. Traits range from things like being a womanizer to being deeply religious to having extravagant tastes to being a paedophile, with each affecting different statistics in different ways. Traits and members of the retinue are seemingly random to an extent, but performance in the game will also alter each accordingly. There's no shortage of things to consider, not just in the armies you field, but in the men who lead them. When battles do start, the game of course switches to real time. Here you can arrange your units before the fight begins, setting up formations and groups, and if you're the attacker, choose to wait a few days if the weather conditions aren't to your liking. Weather plays a huge role, with things like fog reducing visibility, and wind altering the flight of arrows. There are dozens of battle maps, with the map of the area you fight in directly corresponding to where the units are in the turn-based map, meaning if you're attacking a castle, your enemies will be holed up behind the walls, forcing you to tear them down with cannons, or scale them with ladders. While if you were ambushed while travelling through a forest, you can expect to be fighting in a forest, which seriously obscures your vision and does a fantastic job of representing the hectic confusion of fighting in a wooded area. The terrain you fight in will determine your tactical choices, and use of high ground, tree cover, or choke points like bridges can be pretty decisive. All of this unsurprisingly means that you need a fairly tactical eye, and this is compounded by elements like morale, as units can break and flee the field, momentum, as charging is more effective, and charging downhill even more so, and then the fact that certain units are really only effective against certain others. Spearmen are very effective against cavalry, but their spears won't do much against dismounted knights, while archers can take apart most enemy units with their arrows, but they're pretty hopeless if not protected by a more effective melee unit. The game will really let tacticians revel in the finer details of commanding an army, with things like formations, waypoints, unit spacing, movement speed, and special abilities like flame arrows for archers and wedge formations for cavalry, all being available and easily accessible through the simple HUD. This, coupled with the scope of the zoom, means you'll never feel hindered in battle, and the logistics of performing a precision pincer, for instance, that routes the entire enemy army is simple, letting you focus entirely on your tactics. Because this is a real-world game, and is realistic and authentic to a point, there's no dealing with the more obtuse elements that bog down most wargames, specifically army balance. Most armies in the game have access to all of the same units, or at least variants of the same units with different statistics, meaning every faction can field the basic spearman, archer and cavalry trifecta. While people used to the radically diverse factions of many RTS games may not enjoy the army similarities here, it's difficult to find fault with the game grounded in reality. The fact that it ensures a balance that may not be perfect, but it's certainly impossible to find fault with without being some kind of savant, completely overshadows any complaints anyone may have regarding each army being basically the same. The battles are glorious. The scope of the game is clearly epic. Epic in the true sense of the word, not the internet meme sense of the word. And with as many as 100 men or more in each unit, and up to 20 units per side, the armies are enormous. Nothing in the history of computer games gets my heart pumping as much as facing down a huge army. And as these armies clash, the units will actually interact with each other, slashing with swords and blocking with shields and so forth. And you can zoom right in and watch your men fight. It may not sound all that impressive, but when we're talking about potentially thousands of individual soldiers all animating smoothly, it's pretty breathtaking. The game is gorgeous, stunning even, and the units all look fantastic. And with the zoom feature, you can see every blade of grass if you scroll right in. The engine does a fantastic job of scaling the visuals as you zoom in and out, ensuring stunning visuals close up and smooth performance when surveying the whole battlefield. Particularly noteworthy are the cities and castles. They're enormous and finely detailed, and you'll find that each building withstands close scrutiny should you decide to zoom in and inspect them. And watching an army of thousands of units, aided by siege artillery like trebuchets or cannons, is really something remarkable. While they may have never been the most advanced in terms of sheer prettiness, I've always found the Total War games to be the most visually rewarding, and Medieval 2 is my very favourite game to look at. And not just the grand scale, but the finer details too. While Medieval 2 is visually largely just a slightly better version of Rome, one extremely cool new addition to Medieval 2 is that most of your men are wearing random bits of armour, meaning they don't simply look like clones. It's the little details like that, and like each unit having multiple voices when selecting them and giving them orders, that makes Medieval 2 such a supremely polished game. But what sours these battles, just like on the turn-based map, is the AI. The AI rarely responds to being flanked, meaning you can easily pull your cavalry behind them and sandwich them in, and they'll just stand there as you close the jaws. In reality, the army would retreat before being flanked, or at least turn part of its force to face the flanking units. And the AI will also rarely respond to archer fire, by which I mean they'll just stand there and take it. I play as the English, who field the best archers in the game, and I've won a lot of traditionally unwinnable battles by just whistling down their numbers with my elite archers, while they stand around dying, then cleaning up whatever's left with my horse. Veteran tacticians will definitely not find it rewarding, but not every encounter plays out like this. Every battle is thrilling in its own way, and on the hardest difficulty I tend to lose about a fifth of all the battles I fight, so nothing is a foregone conclusion. Like the turn-based map AI, it sours the experience, but doesn't ruin it. Outside of the Grand Campaign mode, you'll find the ability to play custom battles, either against the AI or against other players online. This is the equivalent of skirmish mode in an RTS, though rather than army building during the fight, you select your units beforehand, with each unit costing so many points, and each side having a limited number of points, ensuring fair balance. There's also a quick battle mode, which is just randomly jumping into a game, and a historical battle mode. This mode lets you fight some of the most defining battles of the medieval world, like Hastings and Agincourt, and winning these battles is a lot tougher and more satisfying than anything you're likely to encounter in the Grand Campaign. Given that you can let the AI handle all of your battles for you in the campaign, and you can play nothing but battles with the other game modes, Medieval 2 can be played just as an RTT, just as a TBS, or as an RTT-TBS hybrid. It's whatever you want to be, making it clearly a very versatile game. The music deserves special mention. Ranging from militaristic war drum beats to the more sombre style of Gregorian chanting, it all feels appropriate, sounds fantastic, and does a great job of setting its intended mood. No music accompanies battle as well as the battle music in Medieval 2. The sound effects are also all excellent, with the beat of hooves and the clash of steel all sounding exactly the way you'd want them to sound. Particularly worthy of praise is that each unit has multiple voice files associated with it, all with appropriate accents, and there are a few hundred units in the game. Problems with the AI prevent me from giving Medieval 2 my highest score, but it is nevertheless one of my very favourite and most played games. It's remarkably well polished and is supremely playable, and the Creative Assembly must have forgotten more about computer game technology than most developers will ever even know. The turn-based side of things rivals that of a 4X, and while lacking in some of the subtler complexities, the constant sense of gratification makes up for it. And the battles are richly rewarding, both in their epic scope and their exciting brutality. Veterans of wargames will probably find quite a bit to complain about, but the good far outweighs the bad.
Behold how our cowardly foe runs. It's time to press the attack.